Hello and welcome to the Empowered Couples Podcast, where here you get modern, non-boring relationship advice for you and your partner to communicate like pros, fight smarter, and stay on the same team no matter the challenge that you face. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman.
And I'm Jocelyn Freeman, but you all just know us as the Freemans.
And this episode is about red flags that signal a change is needed in your marriage.
Red flags, Freemans? What does that mean? Is something wrong here? Red alert, red alert.
Yeah. Well, big phrase right there, right? But even before we get into this, most of the time when you've heard that phrase or when people talk about it, it's as if it's a description of a warning sign that someone should have seen to signal them to get out of a relationship. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's how I've mostly heard it. So people say, oh, I should have seen this red flag coming, or this is a red flag, but it's specifically saying that this relationship is over and a kind of justification on I was in it too long and should have seen these things ahead of time. Mm-hmm. Now, yes, in one sense, and if that's a dating, maybe engaged type of season, then of course. But we want to change red flag here because we are talking about the context of a committed marriage that is looking to get better or is in a challenging season. But the key being you're in a committed marriage. So it is not about a red flag that means you should get out. It is about red flags that are signals in your own awareness where there is a pattern of behavior that needs to shift rapidly between the dynamic of the two of you.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're going to be heading into a season where you will do more damage to the relationship, and you are really heading into a very challenging season. So who wants to be there? Use these red flags as signals. Hey, we need to come together. We need to talk about these patterns so that we don't go down this path of disconnection, of doing damage to each other, and let's avoid a really challenging season between the two of us.
I've got a couple things I need to say before we get into the specific red flags, and I hope
I
feel like kind of strong emotion about it, so I want to make sure I don't come in with too much heat. The first one, I just wanted to actually create more of an analogy, a different way of thinking about this, because so I thought of my grandpa, oddly, and you and I, we don't even talk about that because I haven't seen, really my grandparents in a long time. There's a whole other reason for that and like a fallout between my families. But my grandpa died from diabetes. But what he really died from was not listening to what needed to change. I mean, he got to the point where, like, literally, I think they had to take off some of his toes. Oh, wow. And he couldn't see anymore because it can damage your vision and so many other effects. Now, he didn't listen to the red flags earlier on that I'm sure his providers were giving to him, which were like, hey, here's what's happening with your blood sugars, and here's what you need to do, and here's what you can change. And he didn't, and the effect was horrible, right? Not only did those things happen, but he ended up passing on from those things. And I know that's an interesting thing to bring up, but in your relationship, the damage can be so bad that it feels like it can't be repaired, and we don't want you to get there. If you don't listen to these red flags earlier on, there can be like just this so much pain and hurt from each other that it's like how it would take a lot more to build back. And it is possible. We're not saying it's not possible to build back from there. It's just you don't want to have to get your toes taken off, to say, in the marriage, right? You want to tackle things earlier on. And so this brings me to the second thing I'm feeling fired up about, which frankly, I am sick of getting messages from people who are saying their partner will not work on the marriage. And now I'm not sick of it because of the person messaging me. I am totally fine with you messaging me those things. More so, I'm tired of people thinking it's okay to be in a marriage and not work on it. And there was someone who asked a question of, what do I do if my partner or my spouse won't work on things? And I said, well, it depends on the urgency and the severity of things. And that'll lead into these red flags that we're going to go into, because if it was any of these red flags, I wouldn't be asking my partner, can we work on things? It would be a non-negotiable. It would be, this is red alert, red alert. I'm not okay with this. Of course, you have to say it in the right way, the right tone. I'm not saying attack your partner and be like, this has to work. Your approach can come from strength, from certainty, from knowing what you deserve.
And not just a confidence, but a certainty. We are doing something about this. Different than you better change all these things.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It is a very we approach. You can come from an urgency, as you mentioned. You can come from a strength. You can come from just a grit about it to say, this isn't going this way anymore, and we're going to do something about it together.
And we'll get into some of the things you can do to change these, but I just want you to know, and I hope you're, going to have your partner listen to this episode. And if you're the partner that's listening and your partner sent this to you, I want to invite you to step up to the plate and know that all marriages take work. You don't just get married to someone and then it's magic and butterflies and it's just going to work out. No, they all take work. And if your partner is asking you to step up to the plate and work on things, that doesn't mean something's wrong with you or that you're flawed. It's just a part of the game. So I was feeling a little fired up about that because I just would, Aaron, if you were like, I'm not willing to work on some of these red flags, I'd be like, all right, we've got a bigger conversation to have then, right? I just would not accept that. And that's what I want you all to know what you deserve, and you deserve a healthy and happy partnership. So I hope that speaks to some of you guys before we get into these red flags.
Well, we're going to do that now.
Yes.
So the first red flag, and I'll kind of outline or summarize each flag, and then we can just riff on different examples of it. So that's how we'll flow with this one for you, the listeners. The first one is isolation. And the obvious thought about isolation is the physical proximity. So yes, if a partner is not home very often because, let's say, of work, or fill in the blank of any other obligation or activity that they are participating in where they're just not home very often, and so your isolation comes from an actual physical proximity. But it can also be that you're in the same place and you feel isolated. You could say, and kept at an emotional distance, not being open with each other, you could say, shutting down after conflicts and not talking or repairing them. And then it can lead into kind of the behaviors of stonewalling, giving the silent treatment, all of that leading to a long argument hangover disconnect where you're just isolated. You feel completely separate from each other. And
this isn't the same thing as, oh, we're kind of tired at the end of the day and we both like to, be quiet and we're not interacting every night. That's a little bit different, right? Of course, that'd be an alarming thing if it was every single night and you never were really interacting and kind of having, it might be a yellow together. Flag. There we go.
These are the red flags.
Yes. So red flag, I want to speak more to that stonewalling and silent treatment. So first off, silent treatment is just unacceptable in relationships. And the silent treatment is when you are intentionally ignoring the partner. They are not making eye contact, pretending you aren't there, intentionally not responding.
Avoiding you, like not being in the same room. But go ahead.
And so that's different than I'm going to take a pause, right? And that's something
communicating and verbalizing that you're requesting a pause.
But silent treatment is a red alarm toxic trait in conflict. It is a must to work on. And then stonewalling, the Gottmans really talk about this a lot, that stonewalling is when it's kind of like silent treatment. It can look like silent treatment. It's when the person is shutting down and how would you describe because it's a very much an energetic thing. Like, I'm pissed at you, but I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say the thing. I might be answering you. I might be giving you responses, but they sound very defensive, I'm mad, but I'm not going to be direct with you. How would you describe someone?
Shutting your partner out intentionally.
Yeah. But again, they might be responsive, but they just sound mad, right? And so both of those things are so isolating. And isolation is actually a tactic that can feel like torture. I mean, I'm not saying the person is intentionally torturing you, but human beings need connection. We need to feel a presence. And so no matter how busy you are, no matter how much you have going on, no matter if you just argued, you do not want to make your partner feel isolated because it is extremely painful to someone. So it is a major red flag.
And when you do have challenges, which you're going to, and we've been really hitting on that theme a lot recently, that there's no not only avoiding of your conflicts between the two of you, but there's no avoiding challenges in life. And so rather than try to do that, you can actually build yourself to be stronger, and isolation doesn't allow for that. So when these challenges do come up, you're either completely handling them on your own or you're completely unprepared, and it's just going to magnify your disconnect, your dissatisfaction. So if in your marriage there's at all isolation, that's literally the one opposite of what you got into a marriage for, or what's healthy, and so that's got to be addressed. And how you would address it will give some things to change, the patterns, the behaviors to change. And this will be a little bit shorter, but you want to make more deposits to each other. So this is something we do longer in coaching, but every interaction you could think of as either a deposit, a benefit, an increase into the love account of your partner, or a withdrawal. And when you see it like that, it just becomes very clear on how you're doing in that realm. So more deposits. And then also, verbalizing appreciation to each other, opening up to each other, and allowing for the feelings that are there. So obviously the isolation, physical proximity is one thing that you should change. That's more of an obvious one. Change your calendar, change your job.
Yeah,
be
change
home
your
more.
job.
Whatever you have to do, that one's a little bit easier.
Quit the job that makes you travel and be away from your family all the time.
Yeah, we're going to get to values later, but maybe you need to really look at your core values and if you're in alignment with them. But with the isolation that's from a emotional standpoint, it's really about opening up to each other. I mean, positive feelings, yes, but I think the isolation comes from a resistance or a lack of being vulnerable to share negative feelings. And maybe it is from your fear of their response, but you have to create an environment in which you can open up and share your experience of life, probably even more so the negative ones, if you will, and just allow for that sharing, for that listening, for that understanding. And that'll go a long way in moving from the isolation to feeling maybe unity or connection.
Just to briefly speak to the people who stonewall or give the silent treatment, I was actually messaging with someone on Instagram who was like, Freemans, I'm guilty of what you just said. I'm guilty of being the person who gives the silent treatment. And I do it to my kids and to my spouse. And they're like, I feel ashamed. And just the fact that they were willing to recognize their pattern. And so any of you who resort to that pattern, I don't want you to feel shameful and make yourself be like, I'm a terrible person, because that was a learned behavior and really is a coping mechanism for something that you probably feel is uncomfortable. Now, I want to create some urgency for you that if you resort to stonewalling, if you resort to giving the silent treatment, it's something you need to actively work on, whether that's through pursuing your own personal development path or talking with a therapist or with a coach, someone that you can actively work on unlearning that pattern and learning how to engage in uncomfortable conversations and acknowledging the emotions that you're feeling, which is probably what you're doing. You're trying to kind of remove yourself from what feels uncomfortable. So I just wanted to say that it's not about being, ashamed of that, but it is about creating urgency and really working on switching that pattern.
Yeah. So let's move to the second one, because it's the opposite actually, and it's suffocating space.
That's interesting.
So you had isolation. The second red flag is kind of the complete opposite of that, being that there's the term in relationships is like togetherness. So you can actually have too much togetherness, not enough separateness or individual time, self-care time. It leads to codependency in a part of maybe an anxious attachment style, which maybe at the beginning, but I think there is a sense that when you're in a relationship or in a marriage for a while, you can also start to lose a certain identity, and you may adopt more of an anxious attachment style rather than maybe you were in a secure attachment place before. So more on that, the loss of an individual identity. I think that's a common one. And then that's not in and of itself the red flag, but I think since we're labeling as maybe yellow flag, feeling as if you've lost the individual identity. And maybe that comes on the big changes like becoming parents. I know we were really focused on what our identity was, and that we were conscious of our needing to shift into an identity from our old one for sure. So it never got us, the two of us, into a suffocating space, for example, but it's, again, going to be on the path. So what you need to do is to make sure that you have the opportunity to make your own choices. Still, that's kind of opposite of like I lose my identity. All the decision making is up to my partner. I relay, or I have them make all the decisions. Defer was the term I was thinking of. I defer almost everything to my partner. And we've been hearing this a little bit more, if you agree, from female partners actually, that men can get into a place where they are not clear about their identity, and they tend to get into a place where they just defer and default all the decisions. And then females don't want to be in that all the time. And they're in the masculine, decisive leadership of the marriage all the time. And that's also not good for any passion, desire in a relationship. So you also value coming from their attention and affirmation. And overall, if I had to use another word for this, the suffocating space being smothered. So that was my summary. So
I was going to also say too that, so we were on a session a couple weeks ago, and the analogy I used was like a rubber band. So in a secure partnership, you can stretch the rubber band and kind of become like a little bit further apart from each other, right? So rubber band, imagine pulling it apart, but then you come back together, and there isn't anxiety when the partner maybe is a little bit more quiet, or, hey, I want to spend some time with friends, or, hey, I'm actually wanting to pursue this hobby, or, you know what, I'm really passionate about this business, and not feeling as though it's catastrophic to feeling connected. And so, of course, like some kind of harmony. I don't know that balance is always possible, but some sense of harmony of togetherness and separateness, as opposed to, oh, my partner is wanting to hang out with a friend, or they're joining this new, athletic club. And what about, me? And so you need to be able to have something individually this is kind of going to the change. Hope you don't mind switching there, right?
Yeah.
Having something that each gives you a sense of purpose, of inspiration, of creativity, if that's what you want to have, but just a sense of self. So I actually went to a women's gathering yesterday, and it was just nice to have a moment that I was just Jocelyn. I wasn't mom in that moment. I wasn't wife. I was just me, right? And that can be something for men, if it's going and joining a soccer club, and it's like you get to be just you, playing a sport and in the zone. And so, of course, ideally be something constructive that you do, and not as opposed to, oh, my time alone is at the bar, drinking a bunch. That would probably not be the best habit to form.
Yeah, almost sounds like you're creating your own isolation.
That's right.
And not having coping mechanisms.
Yeah, but just something that gives you a sense of self again.
Well, I want to take that a little bit further, then we'll move to the third one, sense of self, but then I think this has a big area to do around a lack of personal meaning. So, this is a huge topic, so we don't have time to do it here, but essentially meaning comes from four main elements, if you will, and that is belonging, purpose, storytelling, and transcendence. And so very, very short here. But again, if you feel like you're having to just be with your partner all the time and you don't have any of this, it probably is coming from not feeling that personal meaning. So going down a path to discovering more of your purpose, it would be about looking for places where you can feel belonging. The transcendence is that you're focused beyond just your individual self. And so sometimes that can be found in like expression outwardly of your purpose. Sometimes it's like being a part of a community, like a church or a service, and that can bring that feeling of you're doing something beyond yourself. And then the storytelling is an interesting one, more that I need to dive into, but just being able to tell the story of your life. And yes, with your partner, I would say, but also just with people in your life. The storytelling, stories and kids are actually the two things that go beyond our lifetime. And not like your kids, but kids in general will always be a legacy. But so is storytelling. I mean, that's one of the oldest traditions of moving anything forward. And so being able to be present to your own story of your life and telling that also brings certain meaning. Then, of course, lastly, you could think, well, my story isn't very exciting. Like, who wants to hear it? Well, then that should trigger you into looking more into the belonging or the purpose.
The meaning.
And that generates meaning. Then the more you feel like you're in your purpose, the more you tell your story, then you just kind of build from there.
Yeah, I think that's great. So let's go into the third red flag to keep a lookout for, which is volatility. So a term by the Gottmans is harsh startups, which means that in a way you go from 0 to 60 or 0 to 100, right? It's not like a slow escalation. It feels as though it goes from kind of like cool, calm, collected to we're yelling at each other all of a sudden, or like they're mad. Why are they so mad from this small thing that just happened? So it's like this highly reactive state within the relationship. It can also be described as walking on eggshells. You know, it feels as though I have to really tiptoe around. I can't say this, I can't say that. A couple of partners actually on sessions this last week said, I'm always confused. Like, what did I do? It feels like I can't say the right thing. And so that's kind of that same experience is I don't know why this small thing I said or the tone or this one word took my partner to upset so quickly, right? And it doesn't feel good to be walking on eggshells or feeling as though you can't express things because of fear. This would be really impactful if it was especially about needs, right? If it was about even trying to describe things that you need or you want within the partnership and your partner gets very upset, that would feel really not great, right? So it's not even just about, oh, I brought up the dishes. It's like, hey, I was trying to tell my partner I could use some quality time and they got, really mad and it turned into a fight.
Yeah, volatility is that reaction, but can also be just very inconsistent emotional state that you're not sure when you wake up which partner you're going to be interacting with. Yeah, which is the mood, the attitude, and so being one that's very sort of volatile and all over the place, almost chaotic in your attitude, your mood. It usually leads to that you can't count on this person and that overall you're just going to keep a distance. I mean, we all have a sort of a need of feeling certain stability, and this volatility is the opposite of that. So you tend to kind of shy away, just like a ticking time bomb, almost like I'm not going to interact with that person because who knows where it's going to go, what I'm going to get. And so there are a few things you can do to start to change this pattern.
Yeah. So the first thing I would talk about is, so the Gottmans, right, they came up with the harsh startups. The opposite would be soft startups, which is where you can express things to each other, you can de-escalate emotion, and that's ultimately the goal that you can create together as a couple is we need to know how to regulate our emotions and keep things de-escalated. But I want to speak to something that if you are noticing there is volatility within the relationship, harsh startups going on, that's a signal a lot of times that something isn't resolved for one or for both of you. So when human beings are kind of like trying to ignore the thorn in their back, they will look around their environment for the perceived quote unquote threat. And so this could mean that something isn't resolved within your partnership and or something isn't resolved in their life. So we can, with couples, we'll find that it's sometimes both. Maybe they aren't resolved with a parent actually, and they are hurt with a parent or a friend, and they aren't dealing with it. They're not dealing with either that they are sad about it or hurt. It's not resolved. And so instead, they're on more high alert in their environment. Of course, also within the relationship, if you didn't resolve some arguments that have happened in the last few weeks, right? And you're just kind of moving on and just going through the motions, but both of you are kind of hurting or feel as though there's like a lingering question of, well, do they actually not love me that much? Or do they not think I'm doing enough? Or just those lingering questions, again, it can put people on more like high alert. And so that's where a lot of times the reactivity can come from. So what you ultimately want to learn to do is learn how to repair. And that can be repair within your relationship, just repair within your life. Know how to get things resolved, because when you know how to have things be truly resolved, not just swept under the rug and you're tolerating each other. I'm talking about true understanding, completion, resolution. You feel so much lighter. You won't be carrying around the baggage. You won't be so reactive to anyone, really. So we talk a lot about repair, obviously. If you are a new listener, make sure you dive into more episodes. Our book, The Argument Hangover, goes into that. But the most, I'd say, actionable way to learn about repair is with our Making Up and Moving Forward guide. You can think of this guide as like a playbook, because it's actually going to direct you step by step on, first off, what to reflect on personally. So it gives you prompts, things to consider, to reflect on, so that when you do go to your partner to repair, you have a more complete thing to share with them. And you aren't just kind of like stumbling around, like, what do I say and what do I do? And it also helps you prevent common mistakes that couples make in re-triggering the conflict. When you even try to repair, now you're arguing again about it. So honestly, the Making Up and Moving Forward guide is just something every couple should have. You're able to open it up after arguments on your phone. You can print it out, and it's $19, you guys. So imagine like less than a great lunch. You can have forever the tool to actually repair after arguments. So go to thecouplesexperience.com/guide, and that will also be linked in the show notes as well. So with that, Aaron, do you want to take us into the fourth red flag?
And kind of combine this one, but it's jealousy and mistrust. And the jealousy can come more obvious from, let's say, another relationship that your partner might have. And it doesn't always mean that it's romantic in nature, but there just might be some jealousy of the nature of the relationship. Maybe that person is more privy to the experiences, the up-to-date emotions that you're having. So there can be some jealousy around that. Let's talk more than just the obvious jealousy. It's interesting because you can be jealous of your partner, we've seen, especially when you become parents, around a variety of things, like individual free time a partner has. And I mean, we've had little conversations about it, but we see it more with other couples. You know, if we have certain days where it seems like I'm chilling more, like I'm on the couch, I got a workout. It doesn't happen too often. Maybe another friend came down, went on a bike ride, and I kind of got like this whole day to myself, where it was now your responsibility 100% to be with Sky and got no break. Then, you know, you've gotten to some places like, hey, I'm not jealous, let's say, but that was a lot. I need a break here. So for those that have had that go on, I think as more of a repeating thing, there's a jealousy about, the amount of personal time that one partner gets over another.
Or the role you get to play versus I get to play. You
That's
get to
true,
leave the house and go to work.
Yeah.
I'm here all day.
And maybe as entrepreneurs, some can feel as if jealousy about the significance and the influence and the achievement that maybe one partner is having out in the world. And I don't know if this would only be for stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home parents, but maybe being at home, you're not feeling as much of the significance. Obviously, the work that you're doing with your kids and helping raise them and be there with them
is pivotal.
So pivotal.
Life-changing.
Yeah, life-changing.
Critical.
Yeah, okay.
Mission critical. And saving humanity. No.
Yeah, and it might be easy to forget that from time to time because you see, let's say, your partner out, I don't know, living this life and treating clients and getting to do all these things. So again, it's just places to really look. Jealousy is not something that should reside between two partners in a marriage. I'll just move to the change, and you can talk about the mistrust, but the change for the jealousy would be that you support and you encourage each other. Obviously, you can talk things out where you feel that there's a misalignment on roles and responsibilities, or there's new needs you feel you want to share. But ultimately, with the jealousy, I mean, you need to be encouraging. You need to be supportive of each other. Mm-hmm. So I kind of shifted gears. You want to do some mistrust and the change there?
Yeah. So with trust, right, it's, can I count on my partner? Are they telling me all the truth? Are they leaving any details out? Are they hiding anything from me? And if there is any of that and your partner isn't transparent with you, that's a major red flag, because transparency and trust, I mean, does that even need to be said that it is just foundational? It is required. And it is both partner's responsibility to create trust. And so if you've ultimately gotten to this place where you're feeling like you have to question your partner, you have to wonder if details are being left out, can I count on them? I was reading a message from someone today that was like, I will hear my partner make these little promises, then they don't do it, then they say they're going to make it up to me, then they don't do that. And so I don't want to seem as though I am quote unquote nagging them, which is a terrible position to be in, to feel like you're having to be the one that's following up and you can't count on your partner's word. So the change that both of you need to take on is to be your word, to keep all promises. And truly, we can't tell you how fundamental it is to just living, that we need to know our integrity is number one. That was one of the powerful things we learned in a self-development program we did early on in our relationship, even while we were dating. It was awesome. We were dating and doing this self-development, learning about integrity. And to know that, like, that you lose power in your life when you are not keeping your word. You actually stop trusting yourself as well. That's where confidence can be lost. That's where self-esteem can be lost as well. So the change is to be your word, to only make promises that you can keep. And if you can't keep one, not because you're a bad person, but maybe something comes up and you can't keep it, bring that up to your partner. Acknowledge it and then make a new promise there.
I am with you 99%. I just have to say
right.
One small thing, because I just had this conversation with a kid outside. Mm-hmm. I probably don't have to even bring this up now, but I don't want anyone being left with, you only make promises you can keep, because you could end up playing really small in your life. If I only make promises I know I can keep, well, I'm not going to stretch myself. I'm not going to push myself very far. So yes, to what you're saying, and the small little piece I would say is you make promises with the 100% commitment to doing what it needs, what it's going to take. And sometimes you don't know the answer, and that's fine. But your commitment to realizing what that is and staying on the path, and whatever comes up, you're going to do your very best to keep it, but you don't know how. That is a pretty powerful place to come from as well.
Mm-hmm, definitely. That's a bold step, though. I think that's maybe step 2 for people.
Yeah, well, maybe even 3 or 4. I just had to say it so that people weren't left with something around that. Uh-huh. And so let's just move to the last red flag, which is belittling.
Yes.
And this is the verbal, personal criticisms and attacks, putting the other person down. Blame, of course, is in there. You could think of really tearing down your partner, or even specifically over time labeling the person and their character rather than their behavior, which does kind of move to the change. But you wouldn't think you would ever get to this place, but this amount of criticism, this putting your partner down, an obvious red flag. And for many listening, you probably think to yourself, well, never would have saw myself going there, never will be there. And we hope that none of you are. But as far as a red flag, this level of tearing your partner down, this belittling, is definitely a red flag.
So there's a popular phrase that is hurt people. And it's so true. And so if one or both of you is belittling each other, it actually is probably coming from internal pain. Because sometimes when we are feeling pain, we are feeling hurt, we are feeling needs unmet, we're feeling resentment, the unconscious pattern that can come out of it is, I'm going to then inflict pain on them. Let me see if I can poke and prod and kind of hurt them just enough to activate them and get them to see the significance here. And so it's ultimately coming from an intent to probably try to work through things, but it's just not going to work. Belittling your partner is not going to lead you to the outcome. And you can't resort to making your partner feel small enough so that you feel powerful. You can't resort to making your partner feel bad enough that they then want to make something up to you, that they want to be better. So belittling is just unacceptable, guys. Like, we just got to make that clear. It is just not okay. It doesn't matter where it's coming from. It doesn't matter if you're hurting. You cannot tear someone down and then have it think it's going to lead to a positive effect. So
yeah, you really need to build up and encourage, which is, definitely a thing that supports all these flags we've been talking about. But even specifically, I would say to specifically set your intention and an agreement to only share feedback during set times of a debrief, which is what we did the podcast on last week. So go listen to that, which is debriefing after a conflict. So having this family meeting time to debrief where you can get better, then what that leaves you with in between is this new term I learned called silent tolerance. It's just recognizing that you don't need to make comments for everything. Mm-hmm. And just be able to have the conscientiousness enough to say, is this a one-off? Do I need to really say anything here? Am I going to put my partner down for this? Obviously, grace, compassion, understanding of what they're going through. And the silent tolerance until something has repeated itself 3 times. So then after that, I would say, okay, that's going to get added to our debrief or our family meeting time so that we can address this now and change the behavior. And that's just a way to kind of combat the belittling, because I think that happens more as a reaction in the moment as well, and just speaking your mind, but it's coming from a very hurt place. So pause yourself, just silent tolerance for a little bit, identify is this a pattern, bring it up in a debrief.
And I would say that the silent tolerance in that time, if you're looking for like the 3 times, like let's say it's about they did something with the dishes that bothers you, for example, then in that time really reflect on the need so that when you do bring it up, instead of criticizing your partner, you can express the need, you can make a request. So those
Which has to do with the Making Up and Moving Forward guide.
That's true. The guide does.
From the playbook.
Exactly. The guide actually then ends with some ways that you can make requests of each other. You can, make agreements and progress so that it's better in the future. So we hope that these red flags were insightful and that you are taking away changes that you can make. Know that these red flags don't make you a terrible person or a terrible couple, but they do need to change, right? So there is a sense of urgency, and that's why in the beginning we said these are non-negotiables. These aren't like, oh, my partner's not willing to work on this. This is like foundational to just a healthy relationship that can thrive and last. So definitely need to be worked on, definitely need to be tackled, and we're all on this journey of growth, evolution, transformation, getting better, and we're there with you. So we hope this was helpful and insightful. Please give us 5 stars on the platform you're listening on, send us a message that you enjoyed this, and make sure to grab that Making Up and Moving Forward guide, which is linked in the show notes. We love you guys, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.